Hello from Patina Meadow. I'm Leila, and today I am back behind the potter's wheel because I thought it would be fun to show you a really cool pottery technique called throwing off the hump. Basically, what throwing off the hump entails is putting a big piece of clay on your wheel and centering just the top, or however much clay you want to use, and throwing your pieces that way, instead of having to grab a new ball of clay every time that you want to throw something new. It was a technique that originated in China and Korea to help speed up production because they were throwing a lot of tea bowls and different things like that, and it just makes everything a little bit faster. This is more of an advanced technique, but it's super fun and definitely worth diving into if you're trying to sort of upscale your pottery a bit. So I have a couple examples of things here that I've thrown off the hump that I want to show you before I actually show you how to do the technique. So first off is this little teapot that I made that has a thrown little handle over here, a spout, and then a little lid as well, and obviously the body of the teapot. So all of these individual pieces were all thrown off the same big lump of clay, and then I all connected them together. Another thing that I find is really great to use this technique for is throwing little mini bowls and things. So these are little miniature like salt bowls or whatever you want to use them for. I really favor this way of throwing for these little guys because it's sort of a pain to have to try and center such a tiny piece of clay on the wheel. So yeah, it's quickly become one of my favorite things. I also just think it looks really cool. So you can go ahead and just jump right into it. Over here, oh my goodness, I have 8 pounds of clay that I've wedged together. This is a lot of clay. Usually when I do beginner classes or anything like that, I do 1 pound of clay because the more clay you use, the harder it is to center. But with this technique, it makes it a bit easier. So I have my clay here. I'm going to set it down on the wheel. And I'm going to give it a little spin. I'm sort of going to slap center it, push it down a bit, try and get the bottom nice and secured. And then this is actually a really good thing to note just if you're making pots of any size, is when you spin it, if you notice a lot of inconsistencies, you can sort of spin it a bit slower. Slap in the sides that are undulating outwards, big word, to make sure that it gets as close to the center as it can. But we're not trying to center this whole thing. What we're gonna be doing today is just aiming at centering a little bit of it at the top. If you wanted to do half of this or you wanted to do a third of it, however much you want to center, we're gonna start with the basics, which is a little bowl. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna get my clay nice and wet. The process is very similar to throwing regularly. We're just gonna work up here. So rather than going all the way down here and trying to manhandle this thing to become all centered all the way at the bottom, I'm just gonna focus on the top. So I'm gonna section off the bit of clay that I wanna use. Usually when I do these little bowls, I do like around like 2 fingers worth, like that. But again, this will all depend on how much clay or how big of a piece you wanna make. So I'm gonna start, I'm really gonna differentiate that little bit at the top. And then what I'm doing here is just as in the centering process, I'm giving it a bit of a cone, so I'm pushing in towards the middle. And then I'm gonna push down to make a little bit of a puck at the top. And I'm gonna squeeze that to center. So I'm gonna center it like normal. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna use my pinky finger and I'm gonna push that down. That will create a little bit of a ridge. So this is gonna serve basically as my new wheel head for the rest of this clay to work with. So what I'm gonna do, now that I have my little ridge, I have something for my hand to push down against, which is just gonna be a lot more comfortable. And then I'm gonna push down like I'm just making a regular hockey puck. So if you've never thrown before, watch my first throwing video that I did that was just basics of throwing on a wheel. And that will sort of show you the steps that are needed to center a ball of clay. So I'm not gonna get too far into the specifics of that, but I'm just gonna push down with my right hand and push in with my left hand. What I'm looking for here is to create a nice uniform puck that I can work with as I go and shape my piece of pottery. I'm continuing that until I have a nice little thing basically like floating above the rest of my clay. So you'll see the bottom is definitely not centered, it's super wobbly, but as we get towards the top, we have a pretty nice centered chunk of clay. I'm gonna give it a little bit of a push, and now I can work with that. So like I said, having this base is super helpful because that gave me a little bit more stability to work with. We've created our little centered lump of clay right at the top. This takes a bit of practice, so I always recommend practicing with pottery. I've yet to meet somebody, except one person that I can think of in my head, who was a helicopter pilot, who had very fine motor skills, who was able to just throw like beautifully right off the bat. I've been doing pottery now for over 5 years, and I didn't try this technique until about a year ago. Patience and pottery go hand in hand. So we're back to the clay, away from my philosophy, back to the clay. All right, so that is nice and centered. When I am throwing off the hump, usually when I'm throwing regular, if I were throwing with a smaller bit of clay just on the bottom, I would use my right hand and use my middle finger and push down that way. When I'm throwing in this manner, I prefer to use my left thumb because, and this is something that you can use too when you're throwing off the wheel regularly, it is really difficult for your thumb to go past the blade of your hand. And it comes down to about the width that you want your base to be in the first place. So that's a really good little hack that I learned at a pottery class not too long ago. I'm gonna take the clay, I'm gonna make a little divot right in the middle with my thumb. Rule of thumb with pottery, rule of thumb, you want to have your hands connected and your arms connected to your body, your hands connected to each other. It helps with stability. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna push down my left thumb with my right hand. And then once I get to the spot where I want my base to be, I'm gonna start pulling out towards myself. And that will create the opening of the base of my pottery. Now we've opened up the piece, so we have a base established. If you listen to anything that I say regarding throwing off the hump, because you don't have the hard base of the wheel, it's a lot more easy for your piece to crack because compression is a bit harder. So you want to make sure that you compress, meaning you push your clay down and create a nice flat surface. This is important for everything you do in pottery or every time you make something in pottery, but especially when you're throwing off the hump because you will get a crack in the bottom if you don't really push that clay down. So now I have my little base, my little bowl, or what is to become a little bowl, and this big hunk of thing that we're not going to pay attention to, but it is like, I just think that looks so cool. Doesn't that look so cool? Okay, anyways, back to the actual point of this. Now I've compressed my base. You can also use a metal rib to do this. If you're making something that's a little bit bigger, pushing that down in there if you're having a hard time pushing hard enough with your fingers or anything like that, but I usually just use my fingers at this stage of the process. We have compressed the base sufficiently, so now we're gonna start throwing the walls. And this, again, is gonna be the same sort of process as if you're throwing something regular sized, except a little bit higher, which might be easier for your back. And we're gonna be using less pressure because we're working with not very much clay at all. This is probably a ½ pound of clay, if that. So we don't want to use too much pressure, else we're gonna move the clay too quickly. The harder you push your clay, the more it moves. So if you sense that your clay is super thick, you wanna push a little harder. If you sense that your clay is really thinning out, you really wanna let up on the pressure. That's something, again, like all things, comes with practice, of like figuring out what the best pressure is. So I'm gonna look over at this side and I'm just gonna start throwing up my walls. Resting at the top, coming off. And this whole time, I'm sort of figuring out where my bottom actually is. This right over like down here is where the base of my piece actually is. So that's gonna be good to keep in mind for when we wanna cut this off the wheel. And when I do my throws, I'm starting from the center of my piece. So my left hand is going into the center, it's touching down into the center. I'm pushing down and then out from the center into the sides of my hands, making sure I don't have too much water in there. I really love these metal ribs. They will cut you, be careful. I have sliced my finger a few times, but the sharpness is really nice to get a solid, beautiful, nice finish on the outside. And it's really nice to use ribs to make sure you're getting a nice, even curve on the outside, rather than having spots that maybe undulate out a bit more. I think I've used undulate twice in one video. Big words. I'm gonna push against that rib on my outside hand. And that's gonna start to allow me to make a nice shape that I like. I'm pretty happy with that shape. I'm gonna go in and just use my rib on the inside as well. So I'm gonna rest my hand on top just to even out that rim a bit. Now I have a cute little bowl that's nice and small, but not too small, perfect size. Once again, going in and pushing down and reestablishing that little stand that I've made. Once again, my base is not all the way down here. My base is up here. So when I cut this off the wheel, I'm actually gonna go and put a little smaller base, a little bit higher. So just sort of pushing. I'm not cutting off quite as much clay that I don't need to. I'm very happy with how this little bowl came out, so it's time to cut it off the wheel, which I think is the most daunting thing if you've never done this before, because when you usually slice a piece off the wheel, you're gliding against the base and it makes it a lot harder to accidentally chop into the piece. But with some practice, you can do it in thin air, basically. There's a couple things that I can recommend to you regarding pre-cutting off the wheel. You can use a heat gun or a blow dryer to just get this guy to be a little bit less malleable, and that will be really helpful. I'm gonna remember where my base is. I'm gonna find that little extra ledge that I made down here, and I'm gonna put my needle tool in straight in so that it's creating a little slot for my wire to go into. Again, just basically sliding parallel against the clay. Now I have this sweet little line that's gonna be a great guide for me to slide through. So I'm gonna take my wire, I'm gonna get it nice and tight. I'm gonna find that line. I'm gonna wrap it around the line and make sure that I'm not getting too much clay underneath the line. I'm gonna glide it against that little ledge that I made and pull towards myself till it comes out the other side. I'm gonna squeeze from the bottom and lift it up. So that's a little bowl. So like I said, what I'll do after this is I'm gonna let this dry for a little bit, and then I'm gonna flip it upside down, put this on the head of the wheel, and carve a nice foot into this. The nice thing about a piece like this is I've given myself enough clay down here that I can actually go ahead and carve myself a really nice foot ring. So that's a little bowl. I'm gonna put this over here. This technique also, I'm gonna get clay all over my face now. It's fine. This technique also works with vases or bowls or basically most things. So you just sort of repeat it. So you squeeze however much clay you wanna use. Let's say I wanna make something a little bigger. So I'm gonna squeeze up more clay, still creating that little ledge by pushing my fingers down and creating that little spot that I can have my left hand rest upon. So I'm gonna push down, and I'm just gonna center it like normal. If you're in the manufacturing sort of side of things, you wanna do things a bit faster. So instead of having to now go clean off my hands, find a new ball of clay to find, wedge it, do all that fun stuff, this will save me a lot of time. Go ahead and push that back down to my little puck. I probably could center that part a little better, but that's fine for me right now. So now I have another little puck, and now I can make something else. So once again, going in with that thumb, down into the middle, pulling out towards myself. So now I'm just gonna sort of continue my making. I'm gonna do a little bud vase. So my base for this guy is actually about up here, I think, about there. Yeah, like right there. So it's way above my little ledge. If you're doing that little squeeze thing that I did, just like that, any amount of clay, if you're doing a big hug or a small hug, it's a practice called collaring in the clay. You want to follow up a collar with a pull. Basically, every time I do this, I want to do one more pull afterwards, because when you squeeze it together, the clay has a tendency to sort of could fold in on itself a bit, and that pull that follows a collar will even out the clay once again. So I'm gonna go in with my little metal rib and I'm gonna do my last finishing touches. So just smoothing on the outside. This will help with that compression as well. And like I said, I'm not too worried about what the bottom looks like because I'm gonna give myself plenty of extra clay down there to carve a little foot. Okay, let's slice it. So, same process. 2 hands, pushing in, boop, boop. Wire, wrap, insert into the little area that I've created here. Slide and pull through. Squeeze down here. Oh, see, that's what happens when you miss your bottom. That's okay. That's what happens when you don't figure out where your bottom is. That'll happen a lot when you first start. And just like that, voila, new piece. Not my finest, most beautiful piece, but it'll do for the purpose of not slicing through the bottom. I gave it a nice thick base. So I have my ledge, my needle, slice into it. Okay, sliced. Second slice. Oh yeah, that is plenty thick. A tiny little vase that has a thick bottom that I can carve a nice foot into. So there you go. And I have clay on my sweater. So that was throwing off the hump. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, it's something that takes quite a bit of practice. As you can tell, I've come to really enjoy the process, and I hope if you try it that you really enjoy it as well. If you found this video helpful, you can give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this or have any recommendations, you can leave them in the comments below, and you can subscribe so you don't miss out on anything else that we do here at Patina Meadow or at Patina Home and Garden or whatever we do here at Patina. Enter second word here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Go get your hands dirty, and I will talk to you later. Goodbye from Patina Meadow.